When single father David saw three men attacking a nurse after her night shift, he didn't hesitate. One bullet later, he lay bleeding on the cold pavement. The next morning, she knocked on his door with groceries and a heart full of gratitude that would change everything. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. David Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked at the stack of unpaid bills on his kitchen table. The single father of 7-year-old Emma had been working double shifts at the construction site, but it never seemed to be enough. His small apartment was modest, with second-hand furniture and toys that Emma had outgrown but still loved. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Emma said softly, tugging at his worn work shirt. Her big brown eyes looked up at him with complete trust, the same eyes her mother had before cancer took her away 2 years ago. "I know, sweetheart. Let me see what we have," David said, forcing a smile as he opened the nearly empty refrigerator. There was some bread, peanut butter, and milk that would expire tomorrow. He made her a sandwich and poured her a glass of milk, saving half of everything for her breakfast. "Aren't you eating, Daddy?" Emma asked, noticing he only made one sandwich. "I had a big lunch at work," he lied, his stomach growling quietly. "You eat up, princess. You need to grow big and strong." Emma smiled and took a big bite. David watched her eat, his heart both breaking and swelling with love. She was his everything, his reason to keep fighting every single day. After Emma went to bed, David sat at his laptop, searching for weekend jobs online. The medical bills from his wife Sarah's treatment had drained their savings, and despite working 60 hours a week, he could barely keep up with rent, utilities, and Emma's needs. It was a cold Friday evening in November. David had just picked up Emma from their elderly neighbor Mrs. Peterson, who watched her after school for free. The kind woman knew about their struggles and never asked for payment, often sending Emma home with homemade cookies. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Peterson," David said, as always feeling grateful but embarrassed by his dependence on others' kindness. "That child is a blessing, David. You're doing a wonderful job raising her," Mrs. Peterson replied, patting his shoulder. As they walked home through the quiet neighborhood, Emma skipped beside him, telling him about her day at school. "And then Tommy shared his apple slices with me during lunch because I forgot mine," she said innocently. David's heart sank. He had forgotten to pack her lunch again, too exhausted from his early morning shift. "That was nice of Tommy," he managed to say, making a mental note to thank Tommy's parents somehow. They were just 2 blocks from home when David noticed a woman walking quickly ahead of them. She wore scrubs and looked tired, probably finishing a night shift at the hospital. Something about her hurried pace and the way she kept looking over her shoulder made David alert. Then he saw them. 3 men emerged from the shadows between 2 buildings, blocking the woman's path. Even from a distance, David could see their aggressive postures and the glint of something metallic in the streetlight. "Daddy, why did that lady stop walking?" Emma asked, also noticing the scene ahead. David's protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Emma, I need you to hide behind that car and stay very quiet, okay? Don't come out until I call your name." "But Daddy..." "Please, sweetheart. Just trust me." David's voice was gentle but firm. He helped Emma hide behind a parked car, his hands shaking slightly. David approached the scene cautiously. The woman was backed against a wall, and one of the men was demanding her purse and phone. She was shaking, clearly terrified. "Please," the woman was saying, "I just got off work. I don't have much money." "We'll decide what you have," one of the attackers snarled. David knew he had to act. He was outnumbered and not particularly strong, but he couldn't just walk away while someone was in danger. He thought of Emma watching from behind the car, and he thought of Sarah, who always said that good people help others even when it's hard. "Hey," David called out, his voice stronger than he felt. "Leave her alone." The 3 men turned toward him, and David saw the gun in the leader's hand. His blood ran cold, but he kept walking forward. "Walk away, man. This isn't your problem," the leader said. "I can't do that," David replied, positioning himself between the men and the woman. What happened next was a blur. David lunged forward as the gun was raised, trying to protect the nurse. A shot rang out in the quiet night, and David felt a burning pain in his shoulder as he fell to the ground. The attackers, spooked by the gunshot and the commotion, ran away into the darkness. "Oh my God, the woman was saying, immediately dropping to her knees beside David. "Sir, can you hear me?" Through the pain and shock, David managed to look toward the car where Emma was hiding. "Emma," he called weakly. "It's okay, sweetheart." The little girl ran to her father, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, you're bleeding." "I'm okay, princess." "I'm okay," David whispered, though he was feeling dizzy and weak. The woman in scrubs immediately took charge. "I'm Rachel, I'm a nurse," she said, pressing her hands against David's shoulder wound to stop the bleeding. "Don't worry, you're going to be fine. I'm calling an ambulance right now." As they waited for help to arrive, Rachel kept pressure on the wound while trying to keep David conscious. Emma held her father's hand, her small voice shaking as she told him about her favorite cartoon to keep him awake. "You saved my life," Rachel said quietly to David. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." David looked at Emma, then back at Rachel. "Because it was the right thing to do. And because I'd want someone to help my daughter if she was in trouble someday." When the ambulance arrived, Rachel insisted on riding with David to the hospital. "Someone needs to stay with Emma," she told the paramedics. "I'll make sure her father is taken care of." At the hospital, Rachel refused to leave David's side during his treatment. The bullet had gone through his shoulder without hitting any major arteries, but he had lost a lot of blood and would need surgery. "I need to call someone for Emma," David said weakly as doctors prepared him for surgery. "Who should I call?" Rachel asked, holding Emma's hand. David closed his eyes, embarrassed. "Mrs. Peterson, our neighbor. She's the only one." As David was wheeled into surgery, Rachel sat in the waiting room with Emma, who had fallen asleep in the chair beside her. Looking at this brave little girl and thinking about her father's selfless act, Rachel felt something shift in her heart. David woke up in the hospital room the next morning, his shoulder bandaged and his arm in a sling. The first thing he saw was Emma curled up in the chair next to his bed, still sleeping. The second thing he noticed was that Rachel was still there, reading a book quietly in the corner. "You stayed?" David asked, his voice hoarse. Rachel looked up and smiled. "Someone had to make sure Emma was okay. Mrs. Peterson came by last night, but Emma didn't want to leave you. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Rachel interrupted gently. "You took a bullet for me. A complete stranger. The least I could do was make sure your daughter was safe while you recovered." Emma stirred and opened her eyes. "Daddy," she exclaimed softly, careful not to hurt him as she climbed onto the bed. "I'm right here, princess," David said, holding her close with his good arm. Rachel watched the tender moment between father and daughter, her eyes misting over. She had never seen such pure love between a parent and child. "The doctor says you can go home this afternoon," Rachel said. "But you'll need to rest for several weeks. No work, no lifting, no strain on that shoulder." David's heart sank. Several weeks without work meant no income, no money for rent or food or Emma's needs. "I'll be fine in a few days," he said, though he knew it wasn't true. Rachel seemed to read his thoughts. "David, I know we just met, but I need to ask you something. Do you have family who can help while you recover?" David shook his head, embarrassed. "It's just Emma and me. We'll manage." "What about work? Will they hold your job?" "Construction work doesn't really work that way," David admitted. "If you can't work, they replace you." Rachel was quiet for a moment, thinking. She had been a nurse for 8 years, and she had seen many acts of kindness and selflessness in hospitals. But she had never met anyone like David. Someone who would risk his life for a stranger without a second thought, despite having his own struggles. The next morning, David was at home trying to figure out how to make breakfast for Emma with one arm when there was a knock at their door. Emma ran to answer it, and David heard her gasp. "Daddy? It's the nice nurse lady." David came to the door to find Rachel standing there with several grocery bags and a warm smile. "What's all this?" David asked, confused. "Breakfast," Rachel said simply. "And lunch. And dinner. And groceries for the next few weeks." "Rachel, I can't accept this." "David," she interrupted, "you saved my life. You took a bullet for me. You could have been killed, leaving Emma without a father, but you didn't hesitate to help me. Please let me help you now." Emma tugged on Rachel's scrubs. "Are you going to stay for breakfast?" Rachel knelt down to Emma's level. "If your daddy says it's okay, I'd love to." As Rachel made pancakes in their small kitchen, David watched in amazement. She moved around their space as if she belonged there, chatting easily with Emma and making her giggle. For the first time in 2 years, their apartment felt warm and full of life. "Miss Rachel," Emma said as they ate, "do you have any kids?" Rachel's smile faltered slightly. "No, sweetheart. I don't." "Would you like to share my daddy?" Emma asked innocently. "He makes really good grilled cheese and he reads the best bedtime stories." David nearly choked on his orange juice. "Emma, you can't just." But Rachel was laughing, her eyes bright with tears. "That's the sweetest thing anyone has ever said to me, Emma." Over the following weeks, Rachel became a regular presence in David and Emma's lives. She came by every morning before her night shift to check on David's healing and to spend time with Emma. She brought groceries, helped with laundry, and even helped Emma with her homework. David protested at first, feeling uncomfortable accepting so much help. But Rachel was persistent, and more importantly, Emma was happier than she had been since her mother died. "Why are you doing all this?" David asked one evening after Emma had gone to bed. Rachel was washing dishes in their small kitchen, something she did every time she visited. Rachel dried her hands and turned to face him. "Do you remember what you said in the ambulance? About wanting someone to help Emma if she was ever in trouble?" David nodded. "Well, I never had that growing up. My parents weren't. They weren't good people. I spent most of my childhood taking care of myself. When I became a nurse, I promised myself I would help people the way I wished someone had helped me." She paused, looking down at her hands. "But what you and Emma have given me is different. You've let me be part of a family, even temporarily. Do you know how precious that is?" David felt his heart skip. "Rachel. I know this is complicated," she said quickly. "I know you're still grieving your wife, and I know you have trust issues after everything you've been through. But being here with you and Emma, I feel like I'm home for the first time in my life." That night after Rachel left, David sat in his dark living room thinking. Sarah had been gone for 2 years, and while he would always love her, he had been so focused on survival that he had forgotten what it felt like to truly live. The next day was Saturday, and Rachel had planned to take Emma to the park while David rested. But as they were getting ready to leave, Emma suddenly sat down and refused to move. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" David asked. "I want Miss Rachel to stay forever," Emma announced. "She makes you smile again, Daddy." David and Rachel exchanged glances over Emma's head. "Emma," David said gently, "Miss Rachel has her own life." "But she's sad when she goes home," Emma interrupted. "I can tell. And you're sad too. You pretend you're not, but I know." Out of the mouths of babes. 7-year-old Emma had seen what both adults were too scared to acknowledge. "What would make you happy, Emma?" Rachel asked, sitting down next to the little girl. "I want us to be a real family," Emma said simply. "I want Miss Rachel to be my new mommy, and I want Daddy to smile like he used to when Mommy was here." David felt tears stinging his eyes. "Emma, it's not that simple." "Why not?" Emma asked with the logic of a child. "You love each other. I can tell. And I love Miss Rachel. She loves us too. So why can't we be a family?" Rachel reached for David's hand. "She's right, you know. I do love you both. I never expected this to happen, but I can't imagine my life without you two in it anymore." David looked at this incredible woman who had brought light back into their lives. "I love you too," he said quietly. "I was just scared to admit it." "So we can be a family?" Emma asked hopefully. David and Rachel looked at each other and started laughing through their tears. "Yes, Princess," David said, pulling both his girls into a careful hug. "We can be a family." 6 months later, Rachel moved into a larger apartment that could accommodate all 3 of them comfortably. She insisted on paying most of the rent, saying that David's contribution was taking care of Emma and being the heart of their small family. David had healed completely and found a new job at a company where Rachel's friend worked. The pay was better, the hours more reasonable, and he had health insurance for the first time in years. Emma flourished with Rachel as her second mother. Her grades improved, she made new friends, and most importantly, she laughed every single day. Rachel helped her with homework, braided her hair in the mornings, and read her bedtime stories when David was tired. "Miss Rachel," Emma said one evening as Rachel tucked her into bed, "will you always be my mommy now?" "Always and forever, sweetheart," Rachel promised. "Nothing will ever change that." "Good," Emma said, settling into her pillow. "Because I prayed every night for God to send us an angel, and he sent you." Rachel kissed Emma's forehead, her heart overflowing with love for this wise little girl who had taught her what family really meant. 1 year after that fateful night when David took a bullet for Rachel, he decided it was time to make their family official. He had been saving every penny he could, and with Mrs. Peterson's help watching Emma, he managed to buy a simple but beautiful ring. He planned to propose at the park where Rachel and Emma had played that first Saturday, but Emma had other ideas. "Daddy, you should ask her at home," Emma advised seriously. "That's where our family lives." So on a quiet Sunday morning, as they sat around the breakfast table that Rachel had bought for their new apartment, David got down on one knee. "Rachel," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "a year ago, you were just a stranger I helped on the street. But you've become so much more than that. You've become my best friend, my partner, and the love of my life." Emma clapped her hands excitedly from her chair. You saved us just as much as I saved you that night, David continued. You brought joy back into our lives. You gave Emma a mother and gave me hope for the future. Rachel was crying now, her hands pressed to her mouth. Will you marry me? David asked, holding up the ring. Will you make our family complete? Yes. Rachel laughed through her tears. Yes, of course. Emma jumped up and hugged them both. We're going to be a real family forever and ever. They planned a small, simple wedding in the park where Rachel and Emma loved to play. Mrs. Peterson helped with the arrangements, insisting it was the least she could do for the family that had brought so much joy to the neighborhood. Emma was the flower girl, wearing a beautiful white dress that Rachel had picked out just for her. As she walked down the makeshift aisle scattering rose petals, she beamed at all their friends and neighbors who had come to celebrate. When it was time for David and Rachel to exchange vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering. David, Rachel said, holding his hands, you taught me what it means to be brave. Not just physical bravery, though you certainly have that, but the bravery to open your heart to love again. You and Emma gave me a family when I didn't even know that was what I needed. David's voice was thick with emotion as he spoke his vows. Rachel, you came into our lives like an angel. You healed not just my physical wounds but the wounds in our hearts. You made us whole again. I promise to love you and cherish you for the rest of my life. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Emma cheered loudly, making everyone laugh and cry at the same time. Their first Christmas as an official family was magical. Rachel had never experienced a real family Christmas before, and David and Emma were determined to make it special for her. They got a real Christmas tree and decorated it together, with Emma insisting that Rachel put the star on top, because you're our family's star. On Christmas morning, Rachel found a handmade card from Emma under the tree. Inside, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, it said, "Thank you for being the best mommy ever. I love you to the moon and back. Love, Emma." Rachel cried happy tears as she hugged her daughter. "I love you to the moon and back too, sweetheart." David watched his wife and daughter together, his heart full of gratitude for the night that had changed all their lives. What had started as the scariest moment of his life had led to the greatest blessing he could have imagined. 2 years after their wedding, the family had settled into a beautiful routine. David had been promoted at work, Rachel had become a head nurse at the hospital, and Emma was thriving in school. One evening, as they walked home from dinner at their favorite restaurant, they witnessed a car accident. Without hesitation, Rachel ran to help the injured driver while David called 911 and kept Emma safe. As Rachel administered first aid, David realized that this was who they were, a family that helped others, a family that didn't turn away from people in need. "Will that person be okay, Daddy?" Emma asked, watching her mother work. "Rachel will take good care of them," David assured her. "That's what we do. We help people." Later, at the hospital, the accident victim's family thanked Rachel and David over and over. "You probably saved his life," the man's wife said, crying with relief. "It's what anyone would do," Rachel said humbly. But David knew better. Not everyone would stop to help. Not everyone would risk their own safety for a stranger. But their family would, because that's what love looked like, extending kindness and courage beyond the walls of their home. As Emma grew older, she often asked about that night when her father was shot. David and Rachel always told her the truth, that sometimes good people have to be brave to protect others, even when it's scary. "Will I be brave like you and Mommy when I grow up?" Emma asked on her 10th birthday. "You already are brave, sweetheart," Rachel told her. "You're brave every time you're kind to someone who's sad, every time you stand up for what's right, every time you choose love over fear." Emma hugged her parents tightly. "I want to be a nurse like Mommy when I grow up so I can help people too." David and Rachel exchanged proud glances. Their daughter was learning the most important lesson of all, that the purpose of life was to serve others and spread love in the world. 5 years after David took that bullet for Rachel, they received unexpected news. The 3 men who had attacked Rachel that night had finally been caught and were going to trial. David was nervous about testifying, but Rachel held his hand throughout the entire process. Emma, now 12, sat in the courthouse with Mrs. Peterson, proud of her parents' bravery. During his testimony, David was asked why he had risked his life for a stranger. "I have a daughter," David said simply. "I'd want someone to help her if she was in danger. Besides, it wasn't really a choice. When you see someone in trouble, you help them. That's what decent people do." The prosecutor then called Rachel to testify. She spoke about David's courage and how it had changed not just her life, but the lives of countless patients she had been able to help because David saved her that night. "That man didn't just save my life," Rachel said, pointing to David in the gallery. He saved every life I've been able to save since then as a nurse. He saved the life of the daughter we're raising together. He saved the future we've built as a family. His act of courage that night created ripples of goodness that are still spreading today. The defendants were convicted and sentenced to prison. As the family left the courthouse, David felt a sense of closure. That frightening night had led to the best thing that ever happened to them. 10 years had passed since that life-changing night. David and Rachel now had 2 children, Emma, who was 17 and planning to study nursing in college, and 5-year-old Michael, whom they had adopted as a baby from a teenage mother who couldn't care for him. The family had moved to a larger house in a better neighborhood, but they never forgot their humble beginnings. Every Christmas they volunteered at the homeless shelter. Every summer they organized neighborhood safety walks. Every day they looked for ways to help others. Emma had grown into a remarkable young woman, wise beyond her years and determined to make a difference in the world. She often told the story of how her parents met to her younger brother, always ending with the same lesson: love means protecting people even when it's hard. Michael, despite being adopted, never felt different from the rest of the family. David and Rachel had taught him that families aren't just about blood, they're about choice, commitment, and unconditional love. "Tell me again about the night you saved Mommy," Michael would ask David at bedtime. "I didn't save Mommy," David would correct gently. "We saved each other. That's what love does, it saves us and makes us better than we were before." As David sat in his backyard one evening, watching Rachel help Michael with his homework while Emma practiced piano in the living room, he marveled at how one moment of courage had created a lifetime of love. He still had the scar on his shoulder from that bullet, but he wore it proudly. It was a reminder that sometimes the scariest moments in life lead to the greatest blessings. It was proof that choosing to help others, even when it costs us something, can change everything. Rachel joined him on the porch swing they had installed last spring. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, snuggling close to him. "Just grateful," David said, wrapping his arms around his wife. "Grateful that I was brave enough to help a stranger that night. Grateful that you were generous enough to help us afterward. Grateful for this beautiful family we've built together." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in that night?" Rachel asked. David considered this. "Sometimes. But I don't regret it for a second. Even if we had never fallen in love, even if we had never become a family, it was still the right thing to do. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be helped." Rachel kissed his cheek. "And you deserve to be loved the way I love you. You deserve to have someone fight for your happiness the way you fought for my safety." As the sun set over their peaceful neighborhood, David reflected on the lesson that night had taught him: that love isn't just a feeling, it's an action. It's the choice to protect, to sacrifice, to put someone else's well-being above your own comfort. He had taken a bullet for a stranger, and that stranger had given him back his life, his hope, and his faith in the goodness of people. Together they had created a family built on courage, kindness, and the unshakable belief that love always wins in the end. And in their house that night, as Emma played piano and Michael giggled at Rachel's silly jokes while she helped him with math, the sound of laughter and love filled every room. Proof that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the scariest moments, and that one act of courage can echo through generations. The single dad who took a bullet for a nurse had found something more precious than safety. He had found home. And the nurse who knocked on his door the next morning had found something more valuable than gratitude. She had found family. Their love story would be told for years to come, not just by them but by everyone whose lives they touched. Because that's what real love does. It spreads, it grows, it inspires others to be brave and kind and generous. And it all started with one man's decision to step forward instead of walking away, to choose courage over comfort, to believe that protecting others is worth any risk. In the end, David Martinez didn't just save Rachel's life that night. He saved his own soul, and in doing so created a legacy of love that would last forever. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. But sometimes, we have to be brave enough to step into danger to find that love. And sometimes, love comes knocking on our door the very next morning, carrying groceries and hope and the promise of forever.